Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today is the 11th of September. Today we're doing a frontline update. We're going to be talking about the situation around Verbove. We're going to talk about Ukrainian attacks on Novomaiorske, and we're going to talk about the Russian withdrawal from the village of Andriivka. Let's first begin by looking at what's going on around the Russian-controlled village of Novoprokopivka, which I've been talking about for a couple of days now, specifically about the Russian control of the fields that are just to the northeast of Novoprokopivka. And we're just looking at their status. And now we've received an update based on new satellite imagery that has come out that gives us an idea of what's going on in the fields and within the actual village of Novoprokopivka. So let me open that up over here. And this is very interesting because this will give you guys an idea of the extent of the shelling over recent days. And I'm going to show a comparison between the shelling that occurred within this village actually yesterday on the 10th versus what was going on 4 days ago. So, of course, all the credit goes to this account over here, and I'll link their post in the description because they have to pay to get access to these images, and they could be very costly. But here you can see that what's going on. You can see that there's new craters, there's new smoke that indicates there's shelling within the village of Novoprokopivka itself. You could see it within the center of the village. You could see it basically in every corner of the village. You can see some of it's in the areas that are leading into the village through a road, and that road comes in from here. In this road, it starts out in, I believe, Tokmak and that entire area, and then it goes north through the Russian defenses all the way into Novoprokopivka, and that's where a lot of the Russian reinforcements they're coming in from, especially those VDV units that were moved in over the past 2-3 weeks to help Russia fortify their lines even further. Now, because Russia still controls this village, we can say that it's pretty certain that most of the shelling that you can see within this image is coming from the Ukrainian side. And the Ukrainians are firing onto Russian positions, and a lot of this is actually coming from cluster munitions that the Ukrainians were given by the Americans. They're called DPICMs, and they are fired from 155 millimeter howitzers. So you could see the changes over here. You could see this area over here, this area over here. They're all being targeted. The fields are to the northeast of Novoprokopivka, areas where you have some Russian forward units operating, a lot of them that are trying to hold the line at the line of contact. A lot of them are also being shelled by the Ukrainians, and they're also being targeted by Ukrainian drone groups and vice versa, as we've talked about so many times on this channel. Now, here is the satellite imagery from September 6th, and you could see the massive difference. You could see that obviously there were still craters, but you could see that there is a significant difference, and those white circles give you an idea of where the changes are most significant. But you could also see changes over here and over here, and this indicates that the Ukrainians are actually getting closer to the village because the Russians are also hitting back and firing at the Ukrainian forces that may be operating in the areas just to the northeast at the moment over here. It also shows that the Ukrainians are ramping up their utilization of artillery within the village itself as Russia concentrates more and more forces as they coalesce their defense within this village as the Ukrainians advance from the north and also from the northeast. Now, moving on a bit to the east, I want to talk about two videos. And by the way, if you don't know how to access my videos that I don't show within my actual YouTube videos, you can see them all on my map. You have to scroll down to the bottom of the legend, and then there's this tab called geolocations. You click on it, and then everything opens up, so you could get them here. But anyway, let's look at one video. This first video comes from the 247th Guards Air Assault Regiment, which is a part of Russia's 7th Guards Air Assault Division, which is a VDV unit that was moved in as a reinforcement when the Ukrainians were beginning to push deeper and deeper into Verbove. And so this video showing them targeting Ukrainian forces on the front line with drones and with artillery does indicate that these reinforcements actually are at the forefront of Russia's defense. So you could see that there's 3 different parts to the video. Part 1 is over here, and what it shows is that there are Ukrainian forces that are trying to enter the Russian defenses, including anti-tank ditch and the Dragon's Teeth, through this specific path. This is a specific local road that leads into Verbove from the northwest, and this is a very popular hub for Ukrainian infantry groups that want to try to break through the line over here and try to infiltrate within the Russian lines. And so that's why the Russians were hitting in that area, as a Ukrainian infantry group was entrenched within the trenches that are adjacent to that local road. And this is an area that's been fired upon very, very heavily by Russians, including with airstrikes on the hedgerows that are around here, marked with these blue rectangles. Now, if we go a bit to the south, another part of the video shows this regiment hitting Ukrainian forces within an anti-tank ditch, which already shows that the Ukrainians are at a point where they're pretty comfortable operating within these ditches. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be hit, as was shown in this video, where they are actually being hit, although I can't speak to the status of those soldiers. It's hard to tell from the video. But either way, it shows that there's more and more Ukrainian forces operating in this area, and at least they're not receiving any sort of blowback from Russian infantry, but they are receiving a lot of blowback from the Russian artillery. It does show how the fighting has shifted further and further east as the Russians try to coalesce their defenses further to the east, sometimes not even in the manned trenches over here, sometimes even further east within the village of Verbove itself, right over here. Now, the most interesting part of the video is this marker over here. This is a marker which shows a Russian artillery crew. They're targeting the Ukrainian infantry, which is something that is par for the course now. But what's interesting is the geolocation. The geolocation is in an area that hitherto we did not know that the Ukrainians were that far south. So you can see that the marker is, about 900 meters away from the defense line. This is what some people dub the first Russian defense line, but I don't like the terminology around that. I hate the semantics discussing Russian defense lines, because it makes it seem like once Ukraine reaches this defense line over here, that it's going to be the first time they even touch a defense line, but that's not true at all. As you can see on the map over here, and I've overlaid all the fortifications, there's plenty of fortifications that Ukraine has already taken over that they had to fight for the past nearly 100 days now, since the counteroffensive really started, that they had to take over, and that's part of why it took them so long. And there's a lot of other fortifications that are not shown on this map that can't be found on satellite imagery. And basically every single tree line that you see on this map, every single hedgerow, every single tunnel, everything is extremely fortified. Every single area has a Russian ATGM crew, has some Russian, machine gunner, sniper, whatever it may be. And they're all dug in foxholes, and they're connected with tunnels. And you can't really get a good idea of that using this map, but that's the case. So maybe in terms of like a unified defense line, you could say it is the first unified one. If you zoom out, it does look like this line specifically that's running through here in red, it does seem to be the first unified line. So if you want to use that terminology, that's fine. But either way, the Ukrainians in that video, when they were being shelled, they were about 900 meters to the north of that defense line. And this is not just a one-off incident. First of all, a lot of the satellite imagery shows that there's extremely high amounts of Russian shelling within this area. And that's specifically on the tree lines that lead up to Russia's defenses over here, which shows that the Russians are trying to clear out these hedgerows to prevent Ukrainians from using them as a route to attack the Russian defenses. But there's another video over here. I'm not going to show it because I can't anymore. Unfortunately, YouTube is very strict with the videos that I could show. But it shows Russia shelling forward Ukrainian groupings of infantry, and it shows that 2 Ukrainian soldiers were also killed in the process. I think there were 4 that I counted in the video. It's linked on my map. But let's actually go to the thread showing it, and obviously all credit goes to the guy who geolocated this. This is the first video. I'm just going to show it quickly, but I'm going to pause it before the end for YouTube reasons. And then if we scroll down over here, you could see that this is further evidence that the Ukrainians have advanced through tree lines in the direction of what's considered the Surovikin line, which is considered to be the first Russian line of defense. And here you can see an aerial view of the Surovikin line and an aerial view of essentially the entire battlefield. So it's very, very hard to see, but this is what I believe is the anti-tank ditch. You could see we're going over it in red over here. And then right behind that in white, which is pretty easy to see, is the Dragon's Teeth. And right behind the Dragon's Teeth, you have like a gap. I don't know how much that is, 100 meters, maybe less. And then you actually have the Russian trenches. I'll fully zoom in on it so you guys get a good idea of what's going on over here. So the Russian forces are dug in over here, you could say, and even further back in some cases. And the Ukrainians, they're trying to attack these positions by going through these plantations, through these bush lines. You could see them throughout the entire battlefield. And then you could see how the Russians are targeting them. You could see that smoke over there. And you could see how some of these bush lines, these hedgerows are being targeted very heavily. You could see the craters over here. And that tells you that the Ukrainians are very active in this region. And I don't know if these are trenches. They may be like a minor trenches in the fields in the region. And those may be trenches that Russia set up sort of like forward bases for their operations that are now no longer manned by the Russians, and those could be utilized by the Ukrainians. But again, Russia's firing on all of that and vice versa. Here's a quick view of the topographic situation, and you can see that the Russian defenses that I just indicated, they are located on pretty high elevation in comparison to the local valley. And that valley is the area that Ukraine has been advancing through this entire time. So you could imagine that's been definitely been a factor in why Ukraine has been taking so long to advance through these fields. It is extremely hard for them to advance without being spotted by the Russian forward observers and their artillery respectively. And then you can see the Russian defenses are located on this hill over here. Now, in the area in between the Velika, Novosilka, and Vuhledar sectors, we do have reports of renewed Ukrainian attacks. The Ukrainian attacks on this region, which are mainly focused on two villages, Novodonetske and Novomaiorske, they really started around September 5th, and they've been continuing since then. And I believe it was 2 days ago that they really started increasing the pressure for the first time in a couple of days. And what's being said by Russian sources such as Rybar is that there is a major concentration of Ukrainian forces in the village of Prachistivka. What Rybar estimated to be the planned concentration of forces in this region is up to 1,000 men from the 35th Marine Brigade. I can't confirm that, but it would seem likely based on these attacks that Ukraine is moving in a certain amount of forces in this direction, and they have been attacking towards Novodonetske with armored personnel carriers. What's going on is that the Ukrainians are they're dropping off their infantry and in groups of upwards of 12, and they're dismounting them near these tree lines. And then from there, the Ukrainian forces are tasked with actually infiltrating within the villages themselves. But in Novodonetske, they were unable to infiltrate yet. If we look at Novomaiorske, the Ukrainians actually were able to, and so this map is incorrect. I have to adjust it to indicate that the Ukrainians have actually been able to enter. And what happened was the Ukrainians, about 12 of them, maybe it was a bit less, were able to go through this route over here, through these hedgerows, and they were able to enter the first houses in the northwestern part of Novomaiorske, adjacent to this river, which is extremely narrow, so it doesn't have much significance. They were able to enter the houses, and I'm sure they're using the basements as cover from Russian artillery. And then they were able to advance a little bit through these roads before they reached this house over here. And that's when they were spotted by the Russians and shelled accordingly. So their fate, I don't think it's known from what I've checked. But this is a microcosm of the situation of Ukraine sending small groups, infiltrating houses, and being fired upon by Russian artillery. Also, a lot of the Ukrainian APCs and tanks in the region have been hit by mines. There's a lot of landmines that Russia has that are dispersed across these open fields. This is an extremely open area. So I think that most of the Ukraine vehicle casualties don't come from artillery, but they actually come from mines. So that's something that Ukraine has to deal with if they want to continue launching these attacks. And I've been stressing that this is an area that Russia should be looking out for a very long time, because this is in the area in between Velika, Novosilka, and Vuhledar. Not as many Russian forces defending over here. The Russian units defending against the Ukrainian attacks include the 37th Guards Motor Rifle Brigade and the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade, and also you have Cascade Battalion of the DPR forces. Those are the three units, and a few other supporting ones that are around, the Velika, Novosilka area. But there's a lower Russian troop concentration over here, and this area is also less fortified. So as we enter the last stages of the counteroffensive season, before mud season really starts and rain starts to make it more difficult for Ukraine to utilize open fields to advance basically throughout the entire Zaporozhye region, who knows, maybe we will see some increased Ukrainian attacks in this region. But that is just one perspective. Let's move on to the situation around Andriivka. Now, around Andriivka, you do have a very large concentration of Ukrainian forces consisting of multiple different brigades, including 5th Assault Brigade, you have 3rd Assault Brigade, Azov, you have the 22nd Mechanized Brigade, you have 92nd Assault Brigade, you have the Liut National Police Brigade, another important unit that's been clearing out Klishivka, and you also have the 80th Air Assault Brigade. I would say those are the main forces that have been involved in these Ukrainian attacks. 92nd Brigade to a lesser extent, but the other ones have been very involved, and they are also pushing in the direction of Andriivka. They're pushing on Andriivka's southern flank, and a video from the 3rd Assault Brigade actually shows the Ukrainian forces, the forward Ukrainian forces, able to clear through these windbreaks. What I refer to as windbreaks are these like bush lines that are adjacent to the rail line in this region. So you have these two different windbreaks. They run parallel to the rail line, and this video, which I have linked over here, I'm not going to show it because I don't know what YouTube thinks of it, but either way, it shows the Ukrainian forces advancing towards the rail line and taking up positions, dugouts, all of that in the area just to the south of Andriivka. It does not show them entering Andriivka. There's no footage that claims that Ukraine has been inside of Andriivka. All we have to say that they have taken over Andriivka, the Ukrainians, is a report from Rybar, but I haven't seen many other sources agree with this. I've seen a lot of sources claim this is a gray zone, which is most likely the case because the Ukrainians have been pushing from the south. As we said, they've been pushing from the western flank. They've been pushing from the north, and so it's very, very hard for Russia to hold on when they're being enveloped from all sides, and there is a very good fallback line for them on the rail line itself. So it does seem like the Russians have been forced to withdraw, and that the Ukrainians may want to enter later on. But we do have a video of the Ukrainians hitting Russian positions in this area with DPICMs, these cluster munitions, and this is on a road that leads into Andriivka and onto the rail line itself. And this is a big part of Ukraine's attack over here, and a big part of why they were able to increase their amount of artillery output in this region, because they are now using the DPICM rounds that was given to them by the Americans, and they are firing onto Russian positions, especially when the Russian infantry get out of their fortified positions. That's when they like using these cluster rounds. In Klishivka, the Russians still hold on to the northeastern part. This is confirmed by basically every single source. Even the Ukrainian sources on the ground say that the Russians control about a street and a half in the northeastern corner, and Rybar says that they control about a piece of land that is about 400 meters to the south of the rail line. So let's measure that actually, 400 meters, pretty similar to what I have. And they're saying that the Russians are now actually beginning to counterattack to try to hold the line for as long as possible, while the Ukrainians are trying to finally clear it out in order to reach Russia's next line of defense, which would be on a local level, this rail line over here. This rail line over here, it's not on really any high elevation. It is actually on a rather low elevation compared to the Ukrainian positions on hills that are to the west of Klishivka. But it is important because there are a bunch of dugouts that are within these mounds that the rail line is situated on. And there you have dugouts, you have ammo depots, and you have troop concentrations. So that would be the natural Russian fallback line. And that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.